Good evening, y'all. Thanks for spending your Saturday here and inviting me to come and share what God's done in my life. When John asked me to do this about 2 years ago, I was on the slate like 2 years ago, and then something happened, and it didn't really happen back then. It was no fault of his or mine. It just a scheduling conflict, and life goes on, and you get busy. John's busy, I'm busy, and um, when I met him a couple of years ago, it was because of, well, I debated back and forth all the way up here. I was telling him and Emily both separate conversations that on my way up here, I just put on instrumental music and I was listening to music without words, just letting God speak to me. And I went back and forth of whether or not to tell you who I am today first. And I actually, just now, thanks to Bloodline, that very last song, he said something right there at the beginning of that last song that really changed my mind. I'm gonna go all the way to the beginning. One of the words that stuck out to me first, I got to tell you, John won't know any different what I'm about to tell you because he's got to do me. I've been up here 3 times in the last couple of months, and he's got me on behind a mic twice. So he's not going to believe me when I say this, but I'm telling you that this is uncomfortable for me. So I'm just gonna. None of this is rehearsed. It's really. I'm 47 years old, and so it'd be really hard to really give you a really good snapshot of my life, 47 years of my life. And so I'm just going to speak from my heart and whatever the Spirit tells me. I'm just going to trust that whatever God puts on my heart to speak, that'll be His words and not mine, and it'll resonate with somebody. And that's the goal anyway. I'm just blessed to have the opportunity to testify about what God's done in my life. And the word that he had said at the very beginning of that last song, he was singing about brokenness. And I hadn't thought, I don't even know where this thought came from, but the thought in my mind came immediately. If you've ever seen the Japanese art where a vase is broken and they use gold to put it back together, right? And when he sung that, I opened my eyes a couple of times and I looked around this room and I saw 24 vases. Every one of them with cracks that's been healed with the finest of finest material, gold, Jesus, right? And every one of them is unique. And so I need to testify about my uniqueness and where I came from. And so I'm just going to start at the beginning. And I asked them also if this was recorded because I dance. I wasn't sure if it was on video because I tend to move around a lot. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to make you dizzy. I'm going to be walking back and forth. So I'm originally from Utah, the state. I was born and raised in Utah. I am a son of an immigrant. In 1977, my father migrated here from a foreign country, a third world country, called Laos. Laos is right next to Thailand. And he's a naturalized citizen now. He's been a naturalized citizen for a long time. But when he first came here, he didn't know how to speak English. Their restrooms were holes in the ground. So my mother had to teach him not just the language, but life in general, period. And it started, I'm just going to hit kids. You're going to hear some tough stuff, but it's all right. It's good because God is good, right? God has done something good out of it. One of the things that he brought with him when he came here was the way that he disciplines his children. And from my earliest memory, the earliest memory I have is from my dad beating the snot out of me. And it wasn't a slap or a punch. Give you a prime example. I was probably about 14 years old, and I ticked him off somehow. And we lived in a house that, if you've ever been in a house that has a set of stairs, there aren't normal stairs, right? A normal stairs probably in a house is probably 12 steps. This is more like 16. It was real deep. I ticked him off, and the way that our house was built is the stairs go down in between the front room and the kitchen. And so you could go all the way around. And I was running from him because at this point, like I said, my earliest memory all my life, my dad has pounded on me. I was lucky to have a week of my life. If I went a week without getting my tail pounded, it was a good week. That's a week to celebrate. And so by the time I was about 14, I knew what the get up was. And to just give you an example of the kind of life that I lived, uh, I turned around to see where he was at, and he happened to be right on me, and he Spartan kicked me in the chest. And the next thing I know, I was landing at the bottom. And when I turned over, he was so quick to be on top of me. When I turned over, he was stomping on my chest. All right. That was one occurrence. But it's important for me to tell you that because it will only make God that much better. All right. It only tell you how great God really is. And I want to tell you right up front in the beginning that God uses everything. I didn't know that then though. I was a ticked off kid, man. I was so mad. Um, I the first time I started using substances, I was 8 years old. I got caught sloughing school. Me and my sister was playing quarters, drinking at 8 years old. We were sloughing school, skipping school. By the time I was 12, I was smoking cigarettes. Uh, Started doing weed, other drugs. Uh, by the time I was 15, I'd pretty much in the late 80s, early 90s, I'd pretty much done everything that was out there at that point. And I was a very, very troubled kid. And I grew up in Utah. Y'all remember I told you that. So I grew up around Mormons. I was baptized in the Mormon church, and my dad was Buddhist. So my mother was Mormon, my dad was Buddhist, and a combination of, the way that my dad chose to discipline his children. There wasn't a God. To me, there was no God. And if there was, I didn't want to have anything to do with him because, my father was supposed to be the example of what a father looks like, right? And so um, by the time I made it to the age of 16, this is the first time I've shared this publicly. I've shared it privately, but this is the first time I've shared what I'm about to share with you publicly. And there's a reason for that because God has healed me from it just 2 months ago. Um, just 2 months ago, God had told me that's something that I did in your life so that you could testify about it. And at the end, you'll understand why. When I was 16, there was no point in living. So I tried to end it. And my sister and her boyfriend, at the time, we didn't know what this meant, but my mother and father were on their way out of town. My sister was 15, her boyfriend was 16, I was 16. We were close friends. We went to high school together. And they were on the way to his house, and I was going to be in my house alone. And my sister said that she got a sinking feeling that she had left something at home and that she needed to go back. Right? You all know where I'm going with this. They came home. They came back and found me. I went to the medicine cabinet. So the next thing I remember, I was waking up in the hospital. They had pumped my stomach and so on and so forth. So I can speed this up a little bit now. I've painted the picture pretty well, I think. 16 years old. Within a few months, my parents were getting divorced. For whatever reason, I decided to go live with my dad. How ironic is that? But I think a piece of me knew he was so broken. That's how Jesus creates people. Like he said, I'm an encourager, and I'm not a self-proclaimed encourager. I just know that. I was been challenged in some Bible studies and by my pastor in a group setting. What disciple do you identify with? And I landed on Barnabas, which is an encourager. So anyway, that's why I went to live with my dad. And it turns out within less than a week, I figured out that I had free reign. I was heavy into drugs, crystal meth, not just using, but making it. So my dad worked a day job. So during the day, I was out on the streets. And at night, let me take that back. During the day, I was where he wasn't, which was at home. But before he got home, I was out on the streets. So I was out on the streets all night. Before I turned 17, I chose to be homeless, living on the streets, and I was lost. I should have been dead or in jail, or I never should have made it. I, Anybody that knew me in that era of my life didn't think I was going to make it into my 20s. I was involved in gangs. Uh, it was just a hot mess. Uh, and then at 19 years old, um, my first daughter was born. And I knew her mother was pregnant with her the whole time, but it didn't mean anything to me until I held her in my hands. Um, I held her in my hand for the very first time, and I was messed up, of course. And I knew that something needed to change. Well, let me take that back. I didn't know yet. I went to my mother's house and I got to sleep it off. I think it was like maybe 2 days later. I was in the restroom. I was in the bathroom. I was looking in the mirror, and it was almost like this. It was like a flash right in front of my face. When I looked up, I saw my dad, my earthly father, looking at me. And what I saw looking back at me wasn't his disappointment. It was my daughter's. The reflection I was seeing was not him being disappointed in me, but that I was going to represent what I hated in him. And so I knew something. That's when I knew something had to change. And so I talked to my mother about it. And this is funny. I'm going to tell you this part right now, because if not, I'll probably forget to tell you, but it is the most hilarious thing. I promise you it's funny. So a Navy recruiter ended up showing up on my doorstep, and I decided to join the Navy. But my mother did not know where he came from. Neither one of us knew how he knew that I was looking for something that was going to change my life. I found out last year it was my dad. Weird story. And I didn't know that till over 30 years later. But he knew my dad was an immigrant. He didn't know how to do anything for me except for to call somebody that did. We didn't have that kind of relationship. We still don't. But even God uses the broken. He's still Buddhist. He's still lost. And he's not saved. But that was the catalyst between my daughter and that Navy recruiter showing up on my doorstep. That was the catalyst for change. Still didn't know God. So I joined the Navy, ended up in San Diego, ended up all over the place. And look, you ever heard that saying, you could take the boy out of the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the boy? That was me. All that happened was because I didn't know God. All that changed was my view. My heart didn't change. All that happened was my view changed. I almost got kicked out of the Navy. I'm not even going there. I almost got kicked out of the Navy several times. DUIs, drugs, all kinds of stuff. And by God's grace, I should not have been able to stay in the Navy. I ended up staying in the Navy, and I think the last time that I used a controlled substance, not alcohol, was in 2004. So that was 21 years ago. Alcohol was a little bit later. It was about 10 more years. And the only reason why I could avoid it is because the first 11 years of my Navy career, I stayed deployed on purpose. My first ship, I did, with 5 years, I did 2.5 deployments. And then I could have went to non-deployable status, and I decided to go back to sea because I had that fear. God planted that discernment in me that I didn't even know I had all the way back then. I didn't know God. But in my heart, I knew if you go to shore duty, you're going to find what you don't want to find, and it's going to ruin you. And so I went back to sea, and I did another, first 11 years, I did a total of 5 deployments, and I ended up here in Mississippi, down at the Naval Air Station in Meridian for my first shore duty. And by that time, I was 28 or 29, I can't remember. And when I first, if my wife hears this, she's going to laugh. Well, she'll hear it because I'll share it with her. But I was the definition of a sailor. If you think of when somebody says a sailor to you, first thing you probably think is he was fighting, he was drunk, he was a fighter, he was drunk, and he was sleeping around. For the first 11 years of my life, that's who I was. And when I told my friends I was going to Mississippi, by the way, I grew up in Utah and I spent time in Virginia and California, but I had never been to the South, nowhere near it. And I didn't know a clue about what was going on in Mississippi. And, man, she's laughing right now as she listens to this because my life is so much different now. When I told my friends I was coming to Mississippi, I was like, what the heck am I going to do in Mississippi? And I was thinking, well, hey, I'll get away from the big cities. Um, my friends were telling me, oh, you're going to go down there, you're going to meet some blonde Southern belle and get married. And I was like, oh, guess what happened? I met a Southern belle and she got a hold of me. I never thought I was going to get married. And, a part of me was that I always wanted to, I always told myself that if I was going to be a dad and a husband, I was going to be different. I was going to be the thing that I didn't have. And I never really saw, God didn't choose that time until I had come here, and it was all ordained and it was perfect timing. I still didn't know God though. I met my wife, and we ended up getting married in 2010, and then she went to 2 more duty stations with me. We went back to sea, and then to Pensacola, and then I came here. Okay. Where's God in that story though? Right? Why am I saying before you today? Even though I had joined the Navy, and even though I had taken all these steps to what worlds call success, right? I'm using finger quotes here. I was still lost. I was still empty. I was still an angry person. I still had unresolved things. I still had not taken it to God, the only place where we know that you can really find healing, right? Everybody in this room, I don't think you'd be in this room on a Saturday night if you didn't know that Jesus is where you find healing. So I'm going to just assume that you know that. If not, I'm telling you. My wife and I've been married twice. I have my oldest daughter. If she happens to hear this, I am so grateful for the role that she played, because whether she meant to or not, she was part of that catalyst. Um, but my current wife and I, married, and will spend the rest of our lives together. We have a beautiful 11-year-old girl. But when she was born, again, God used a young little girl, and this time it was a little bit different. My first daughter propelled me into becoming a man, and my 11-year-old daughter propelled me into becoming a disciple. When I held her for the first time, I was in a different state of mind. I was 34, right? Right? 34? 35? Somewhere in there. Um, I was this close to making, is anybody in here military? Okay. I was this close to making a rank that some people never achieved, enlisted rank, before they get out. And I had achieved what I thought was worth. What am I going to do now? I'm standing at this pinnacle of a career. I've got a few years left until I retire. I've got this beautiful wife and a beautiful daughter, and I'm still empty. I've achieved way more than I possibly ever thought I was ever going to achieve, and still felt unsuccessful. And I'm holding this girl, and I'm thinking, I don't know if there's a God, but there's got to be something more. Like, this isn't an accident, And so I started looking for purpose, and he had already been working on me for a couple of years anyway. He had put some people in my life that had really planted a lot of seeds over the, maybe the 5 to 7 years prior. Matter of fact, one of the first guys that I met, that really planted a seed, his name's Mr. C. I worked with him down at the base. That was about 5 years before my daughter was even born. And now that I'm looking back at it, I remember some seeds that he planted, And so that's how God works. Just so you know, at some point, if you take the time, you'll look back and see where God has shown up. And you don't realize it until you take the time to look for it. Anyway, so I started looking for purpose. I knew Buddha wasn't the answer, uh, and I knew the Mormons had it wrong. That's yeah, unfortunately. I learned something while I was in the Navy, and I'm gonna tell y'all because maybe it'll help you to really put things into perspective. There's a thing called the law of primacy. And the law of primacy says that the first thing you learn is the filter in which everything else behind that you learn. I'll give you an example. If your primary language is English and you go to learn Spanish, everything you learn about Spanish has to be filtered through English, right? And that's the way it was when we were talking about God and Jesus and the Mormon theologies, because they talk about Jesus. And so it mixed me up for a long time. And then I met a bunch of people here that really started to disciple me, whether I knew it or not. And I found myself one day on my knees. I was talking to them just like I'm talking to y'all. I was telling them, I was like, hey, I said, I remember saying something to the effect of, I don't really know how to do this. I don't know how to pray, but I do believe you're real. And I need you to show me. And in an instant, he showed me dozens of times where he was standing right there. And he told me in that moment, and I think this is what I'm here to say to somebody. And so if it's you, praise the Lord. He told me that I'm not the father that you think I am. All those false thoughts or beliefs that you have about what a dad is supposed to be like, that's not who I am. And he also told me, God revealed to me that all those things, all those forms of discipline or consequences that I thought that he was placing on me, it wasn't because of him, it was because of me. He said, I watched you make these mistakes. And he showed me all these moments of my life where I had made a lot of mistakes. And he showed me that I was standing there, that he was standing there with me. And he let me make those mistakes because he knew, he said, I knew that you was going to be on your knees today. And he asked, the next question changed my life. Are you ready to live for me? And I'm pretty sure I shouted yes. And I was by myself. I guess I can go back just a hair to tell you the kind of person I had become by that point. God had placed the Navy in my life for a reason. And if you were here at the conference, you heard me talk about this a little bit if you heard me speak at the conference. The Navy played a real important role in me learning how to be a soldier. A submissive soldier. But now I'm committing to being a soldier in his army. Right? He's my commanding officer. I'm on mission. This isn't my home. That's my home. I'm deployed to earth. I'm deployed this side of heaven. He's got purpose for me. And every day, I wake up every day trying to remember that, all right, I'm still on the mission field. I'm still on deployment. So what is my mission today? And he gives me my mission for today. And sometimes I don't get it. I have to guess. And he lets me make mistakes because we all do it. And we're going to make mistakes. And he'll use those too. But one day he's going to call me home. And he's going to say, you finished. Your service is over. You can come home. And so I try to live my life with that perspective. That if I get today, then what can I do to glorify God? And if I lose track of glorifying God, I'm always trying to be a godly husband and a godly father. And so he knows your heart. Every person in this room, he knows your heart, and he knows no matter how broken you think you are right now, you're not that broken because he can heal it all, and he has a plan for every bit of it. He will use it for sure. And so that was in 2015. It was 10 years ago. And now I can tell you what has happened since I said yes to Jesus. I had no degrees 10 years ago. And the degrees don't matter, but it's important because it's led me to John. It's led me to this room, actually. Um, I have a bachelor's in social work, a master's in human services counseling, and I'm in an internship. I met him 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that, because of an internship with Liberty University for pastoral counseling. And I know that's my calling. All counseling is discipleship. That's all it is, walking with people through the things that they're going through in life. And I know that that's what God has called me to do. Uh, he's blessed me. All those things I told y'all about, it was for a reason. No matter how hard we think things are on this side of heaven, it's all for a reason. Because the amount of blessings that we will see when we're standing before him and he's saying, "Good job, my faithful son. Come on home," right? And so this once drug addicted gang member, son of an immigrant, homeless, should have been dead kid, somehow managed to become a chief in the United States Navy with a couple of master's degree, and is out there in the world testifying to Jesus. And let me tell you, I'll close with this. This is the thing I hang on to remind me that every single thing has a purpose. Remember that moment I told you when I was 16 and my brother, my sister's husband, or ex-husband, he is the father of my first niece. And in October, I got to go hunting with my niece and her husband and my niece's dad. And for the first time in 31 years, I got to have a moment with him. 31 years ago, whether he knew it or not, God made him do a U-turn and turn around to the place where he came from to find a young man slumped over on the floor because he wasn't finished with me. 31 years later, all those things that God has done in my life, I get to stand before you and tell you how good God is. And he will use every bit of it. And no matter how uncomfortable you are, just say yes and amen. I know it's hard. I'm going through something right now. I'm not going to share the details, but I should be distracted. And I was when I drove up here because I've had 2 incidences in two separate vehicles this week that's cost me thousands of dollars. And I was distracted when I came up here. But that's just the tactic in the enemy. Try to distract you, keep you off. Because if you're looking over here, God wants you looking over here, and you're looking over here. And you can't do what God's calling you to do. And so I hope if you take away anything that I'm from me, don't worry about 10 steps or 12 steps or 50. Just take the next one. And when you get there, worry about the one after that. Appreciate y'all let me share what God's done in my life. And I hope, I pray that every person in this room, not because of me, because of him, will press into him and ask him, what's your why? What's he got for you to do today? And if you trip and fall, get up, dust yourself off, and take that next step. Appreciate y'all.